The gunshot that shattered the morning silence sent Theresa Kane diving behind the mahogany reception desk of the Lone Star Hotel, her heart hammering against her ribs as splinters of wood exploded from the doorframe above her head. She pressed herself flat against the polished floor, her dark green skirts tangling around her legs as chaos erupted in the street outside her establishment. This was Bandera, Texas, in the spring of 1878, and such violence was not uncommon in the rough cattle town nestled in the Texas Hill Country. But Theresa had worked too hard to let her hotel become collateral damage in someone else's feud. She had inherited the building from her uncle 3 years ago when she was 22, a young woman alone in a town that did not always respect female business owners, and she had fought tooth and nail to turn the dilapidated boarding house into the finest hotel between San Antonio and the western frontier. The shooting stopped as abruptly as it began. Theresa cautiously raised her head above the desk, peering through the front window at the dusty street beyond. A man lay motionless near the water trough, but whether he was dead or merely wounded, she could not tell from this distance. 2 other men were riding hard out of town, their horses kicking up clouds of dust that hung golden in the early morning light. "Miss Kane, you all right?" Her cook, Martha, came rushing from the kitchen, her flour-dusted hands wringing her apron. "I am fine, Martha, just startled." Theresa stood and brushed off her skirts, trying to still the trembling in her hands. She was tall for a woman. With rich brown hair she kept pinned in an elaborate arrangement at the back of her head, and gray-green eyes that could turn steely when dealing with difficult guests. Her father had always said she had her mother's beauty and his stubbornness, a combination that served her well in the hotel business. The front door burst open and Sheriff Coleman entered, his weathered face grim. "Anyone hurt in here?" "No, we are safe." "What happened out there?" "Cattle rustlers tried to rob the bank. My deputy got one of them, but 2 escaped." He glanced around the pristine lobby with its Persian rugs and polished brass fixtures. "You might want to keep your doors locked for a spell, Miss Kane. There is talk more of them might be hiding out in the hills." After the sheriff left, Theresa did indeed lock the doors, though she knew it would cost her business. She had 6 guests currently staying at the Lone Star and 3 reservations expected later that week. The hotel had 12 rooms total, each one furnished with care and attention to detail that set her establishment apart from the rougher boarding houses in town. She had imported wallpaper from New Orleans, purchased real feather mattresses, and insisted on fresh linens daily. Her dining room served the best food in Bandera, thanks to Martha's skill with both traditional Texas fare and the finer dishes Theresa had learned from her mother's French cookbook. The rest of the day passed without incident, though the tension in town remained palpable. By evening, Theresa was exhausted from reassuring nervous guests and managing the extra security measures she had implemented. She was in her small office behind the front desk, reviewing the account books by lamplight, when she heard a horse approach at a measured pace. Through the window, she watched a lone rider dismount in front of the hotel. He was tall and lean, moving with the easy grace of someone who spent more time in the saddle than on foot. He wore dusty trail clothes and a black hat pulled low, and he carried saddlebags over one shoulder. Something about the way he moved, unhurried despite the late hour and the trouble in town, caught her attention. Theresa rose and went to unlock the front door, opening it just as he reached for the handle. "I apologize, but we have been keeping the door locked today due to some trouble in town," she said, stepping back to allow him entry. He removed his hat as he crossed the threshold, revealing dark hair and a face that was striking rather than handsome, all strong angles and weathered skin. His eyes were an unusual shade of hazel, more gold than green in the lamplight. "Understandable. I heard about the attempted robbery. I am looking for a room if you have one available." "We do." Theresa moved behind the desk, pulling out her guest register. "How long will you be staying?" "Not certain yet. At least a week, possibly longer. I have business in the area." She dipped her pen in ink and turned the register toward him. "The rate is $2 per night, which includes breakfast and dinner. Baths are available for an additional 25 cents. He signed the register with a firm, clear hand. Xavier Garrett, from Montana Territory. His handwriting was educated, which surprised her slightly. Many of the cowboys and cattlemen who stayed at the Lone Star could barely write their own names. "Montana is quite a journey," she observed, selecting a key from the board behind her. "It is." He met her eyes directly, and she felt an unexpected jolt of awareness. There was intelligence in his gaze and something else she could not quite name. Wariness, perhaps, or the kind of careful watchfulness that came from living in dangerous places. "I have been on the trail for near about 6 weeks. Then you must be exhausted. I will show you to your room. We have already served dinner, but I can have Martha prepare you a plate if you are hungry." "I would appreciate that, miss." He glanced at the name placard on the desk. "Kane, thank you." She led him up the stairs to the second floor, acutely aware of his presence behind her. The hotel smelled of beeswax and the lavender sachets she placed in every room, scents she had chosen specifically to make the Lone Star feel welcoming. She unlocked room 7, one of her better accommodations with a view of the town's main street and the hills beyond. Fresh water in the pitcher, clean towels on the stand. "If you need anything else, pull the bell cord and someone will assist you," she said, moving to light the lamp on the bedside table. "This is very nice." Xavier set his saddlebags on the chair and looked around the room with what appeared to be genuine appreciation. "Much finer than I expected to find in a town like Bandera." Theresa felt a flush of pride. "I have worked hard to make the Lone Star a place where travelers can find comfort, regardless of how rough the surrounding country might be." "You have succeeded." He smiled then, a slow transformation that softened the hard lines of his face and made him look younger. She realized he was probably close to her own age, perhaps 27 or 28. "I will be down for that meal shortly if the offer still stands." "Of course. Take your time." Theresa descended to the kitchen, trying to ignore the way her pulse had quickened during their brief conversation. She had grown accustomed to running a business in a male-dominated town, had learned to be professional and distant with her guests, regardless of their charm or appearance. But there was something about Xavier Garrett that unsettled her careful composure. Martha was banking the fire in the stove when Theresa entered. "We have a late guest who needs feeding. Do we have any of the beef stew left?" "Plenty, and fresh cornbread too. I will fix him a proper plate." Martha was a widow in her 50s who had been with Theresa since the beginning, more friend than employee. She gave Theresa a knowing look. "Handsome fellow, that one. Saw him through the window." "I did not notice," Theresa lied, busying herself with checking the inventory of preserves in the pantry. "Hum. And I am the Queen of England." 20 minutes later, Theresa was setting out silverware in the dining room when Xavier appeared. He had washed the trail dust from his face and hands and changed into a clean shirt, though he still wore his gun belt. Most men did in Bandera, even inside buildings. The town was too wild, too unpredictable for anyone to go unarmed. She gestured to a table near the window. "Please, sit wherever you are comfortable." He chose a seat that put his back to the wall and gave him a clear view of both the entrance and the street outside. A gunfighter's habit, Theresa thought, though his demeanor was calm rather than aggressive. She brought out the laden tray Martha had prepared. Beef stew thick with vegetables, cornbread still warm from the oven, butter, and apple pie for dessert. "This looks wonderful," Xavier said, and she could hear the genuine hunger in his voice. "Martha is an excellent cook. Would you like coffee?" "Please." She poured him a cup from the pot she had brought out, then hesitated. Normally she would leave guests to eat in peace, but something made her linger. "You said you have business in the area. Are you in cattle, among other things?" He broke open the cornbread, steam rising from the golden interior. "I own a ranch in Montana, but I am down here looking to purchase breeding stock. The Texas Longhorn is hardy, adaptable. I want to improve my herd." "That makes sense. Bandera is certainly cattle country." She refilled his coffee cup, though it was still half full, an excuse to remain. "How did you choose this particular town?" "Reputation. I heard the ranchers here raise quality stock, and that the town had grown civilized enough to have decent accommodations." His eyes met hers again, that same direct gaze. "I am glad the information was accurate on both counts." Theresa felt warmth creep into her cheeks. "We do our best. The town has come a long way in recent years. When I first inherited this hotel, Bandera was little more than a rough camp for cowboys and outlaws. Now we have churches, schools, proper businesses. You inherited the hotel. Then you are not originally from here." "I am from San Antonio originally. My uncle established the hotel here 15 years ago, but he had no children of his own. When he passed, he left it to me." She found herself sitting down across from him, drawn into conversation despite her usual reserve with guests. "My parents thought I was mad to accept. A single woman running a hotel in a frontier town seemed scandalous to them. But you did it anyway." "I did. I had just lost my position as a governess, and the idea of returning to San Antonio to live with my parents, waiting for some suitable marriage prospect, felt like a prison sentence." She was not sure why she was telling him this. Perhaps because he was a stranger, someone passing through who would be gone soon enough, or perhaps because of the way he listened, giving her his full attention. "I wanted something of my own, something I could build with my own hands." "That takes courage." Xavier had finished his stew and started on the pie. "This town must have given you trouble at first." "That is an understatement. The previous guests were accustomed to a very different kind of establishment. They did not appreciate my new rules about no fighting, no gambling, no bringing in women of questionable reputation. I lost most of my initial business in the first month." She smiled, remembering those difficult early days. "But I held firm, and slowly word spread that the Lone Star was a respectable place. Families started staying here, businessmen from San Antonio and Austin. I built a reputation for quality and safety. An impressive achievement." He pushed his empty plate away with a satisfied sigh. "My compliments to Martha, and to you for creating this haven." The word struck her oddly. Haven. She had never thought of the Lone Star quite that way, but it was apt. She had created a place of refuge and comfort in the midst of harsh country. "Thank you, Mr. Garrett. That means more than you might realize." "Xavier, please. Mr. Garrett makes me feel like my father." "Then you must call me Theresa." She rose to clear his dishes. "I should let you rest. 6 weeks on the trail must be exhausting." It was, but this meal and this conversation have revived me considerably. He stood as well, old-fashioned manners that pleased her. "I look forward to staying here, Theresa. Something tells me the Lone Star is exactly what I needed." That night, lying in her own bed in the small suite of rooms she occupied on the first floor behind the kitchen, Theresa found herself unable to sleep. She kept thinking about Xavier Garrett, about the way his eyes had warmed when he smiled, about the quiet strength in his movements. She told herself she was being foolish. He was a guest, nothing more, and he would be gone within a week or two. But something about him had stirred feelings she had carefully locked away for years. Since coming to Bandera, she had received several offers of marriage from local ranchers and businessmen, but she had refused them all. None of those men had interested her romantically, and she valued her independence too much to marry merely for security or social standing. She had begun to think perhaps she was simply not the marrying kind, that she was too set in her ways, too focused on her business to make room for love. Now, after one conversation with a stranger, she found herself wondering if perhaps she had been wrong. The next morning, Theresa was up before dawn as usual, helping Martha prepare breakfast for the guests. They served a substantial meal at the Lone Star: eggs, bacon, biscuits with gravy, fried potatoes, and plenty of hot coffee. The dining room began to fill around 6 o'clock as the guests came down, most of them cattlemen and ranchers who kept early hours. Xavier appeared at 6:30, freshly shaved and looking considerably more rested than he had the night before. He greeted her with a warm smile that made her heart skip. "Good morning, Theresa. Something smells wonderful. Good morning. Please help yourself." She gestured to the sideboard where the food was laid out family style. "Did you sleep well? Better than I have in months." "That bed is the most comfortable thing I have experienced since leaving Montana." He filled his plate and took the same table he had occupied the night before. "What time do the local ranchers typically conduct business?" "Most are at their properties by now, working." "But if you want to meet them, your best opportunity would be this evening at the Silver Dollar Saloon or on Sunday after church services. Nearly everyone in the area attends one of the 2 churches in town." "Church it is, then." "I prefer to conduct business sober, and saloons rarely promote that condition." He took a sip of coffee, then added, "Will you be attending services?" "I will. I sing in the choir at the Methodist church." "Then I will look forward to hearing you." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary, and Theresa felt that same unsettling flutter in her chest. The day passed quickly, as Saturdays always did at the Lone Star. Theresa managed the constant flow of activity, checking in new guests, resolving a dispute about a lost item, supervising the housekeeping staff, reviewing menus with Martha. She caught glimpses of Xavier throughout the day. He spent the morning walking around town, getting his bearings, and returned in the afternoon to sit in the hotel lobby reading a newspaper. "You are welcome to use the parlor if you want more comfort," Theresa said, passing through with fresh linens. "I am comfortable here, thank you. I like watching the comings and goings." He lowered the paper. "This hotel seems to be the heart of the town in many ways. Everyone passes through eventually." "That is true. I learn all the local gossip whether I want to or not." She set down the linens and came to stand near his chair. The lobby was empty except for the 2 of them, the other guests out pursuing their own activities. "What did you think of Bandera?" "It has character. Rough around the edges, but with good bones." He folded the newspaper and set it aside. "The country around here is beautiful. Those hills remind me a bit of home, though Montana is considerably greener." "I have never been that far north. What is it like?" Xavier's expression softened with memory. "Big, open. The sky seems to go on forever, and in summer the grasslands roll like ocean waves. Winters are brutal, cold enough to freeze a man solid if he is not careful, but the other seasons make up for it." He paused, then added, "It can be lonely, though. The ranch is isolated days from the nearest real town. Sometimes I go weeks without seeing another soul except my hired hands." "That sounds difficult." Theresa could not imagine such isolation. Even in Bandera she was constantly surrounded by people. "It has its challenges, but I chose that life deliberately. I wanted space, freedom, the chance to build something on my own terms. He looked at her thoughtfully. I suspect you understand that impulse. I do. She found herself sitting down in the adjacent chair, propriety forgotten. When I first came here, people thought I would fail within months. A woman running a hotel alone without a husband or father to protect her interests. But I was determined to prove them wrong. And you did. Yes, though some days were harder than others. There were times I wanted to give up, to sell the place and return to the safety of San Antonio. But every time I considered it, I would look around at what I had built and I could not bear to let it go. What kept you going on the worst days? The question was intimate, more personal than anything a guest had asked her before, but Theresa found herself answering honestly. Pride, partly. Stubbornness. But also the knowledge that I was creating something meaningful. This hotel is more than just a business to me. It is a home, a refuge. Every guest who walks through that door and finds comfort here, every positive comment in the register, every regular customer who returns because they trust my establishment, it all validates the choice I made. That is not pride, Xavier said quietly. That is purpose. It is the rarest and most valuable thing a person can find. Their eyes met and held, and Theresa felt the air between them grow charged with unspoken possibility. She became acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the way the afternoon light gilded his features, of the steady rise and fall of his chest as he breathed. The front door opened, and the moment shattered. One of her regular guests, Mr. Patterson, entered with his wife, and Theresa immediately stood to greet them. "Welcome back, Mr. and Mrs. Patterson. Your usual room is ready." The rest of the afternoon was consumed with duties, but Theresa's thoughts kept returning to that conversation with Xavier. There was an ease between them that felt both natural and extraordinary, as if they had known each other far longer than a single day. She found herself looking forward to Sunday services with an anticipation that had nothing to do with her choir duties, and everything to do with the prospect of sitting in the same building as a certain guest from Montana. Sunday morning dawned clear and warm, perfect spring weather for the walk to church. Theresa dressed with extra care, choosing her best blue dress and pinning her hair in an elaborate style that took twice as long as usual. She told herself she was not primping for Xavier Garrett, but she knew it was a lie. He was waiting in the lobby when she came down, dressed in a clean black suit that fit him perfectly and made him look like a prosperous rancher rather than a trail-worn cowboy. His face lit up when he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. You clean up rather well yourself." They walked to church together through the quiet Sunday morning streets. Bandera was peaceful at this hour, the saloons closed and the usual chaos of the cattle pens silenced. Other families and couples were converging on the white wooden church at the edge of town, and Theresa was acutely aware of the curious glances she and Xavier were receiving. News traveled fast in a small town, and by now everyone would know that a handsome stranger from Montana was staying at the Lone Star. Walking beside him to church would fuel speculation about the nature of their relationship, but Theresa found she did not care as much as she probably should. Inside the church, Theresa excused herself to join the choir while Xavier found a seat in one of the middle pews. The service proceeded as usual, but Theresa was hyper-aware of his presence. When the choir stood to sing, she could feel his eyes on her, and she put more heart into the hymns than she normally did. After the service, she introduced him to Reverend Matthews and several of the prominent local ranchers. Xavier was charming and professional, discussing cattle breeding and range management with easy expertise that earned him respect from the hardened cattlemen. Watching him, Theresa was struck by how comfortable he seemed in any situation, how he could be equally at ease sitting alone in a hotel lobby or negotiating business deals with strangers. "Your young man seems quite knowledgeable," Mrs. Patterson said to Theresa as they stood outside the church. "He is not my young man, Mrs. Patterson. He is a guest at the hotel." "Of course, dear." The older woman's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Though if I were 30 years younger and unmarried, I would certainly set my cap for him. A prosperous rancher, well-mannered and handsome too." "You could do much worse." Theresa could not argue with that assessment, so she simply smiled and changed the subject. She and Xavier walked back to the hotel together, this time without the crowd of other churchgoers. The morning had grown warmer, and Theresa was grateful for the shade of the oak trees lining Main Street. "You have a lovely voice," Xavier said. "I enjoyed the service." "I am glad. Did you make progress on your business dealings?" "I did. Several of the ranchers invited me to visit their properties this week to look at their herds. John Crawford seemed particularly eager to sell, though I am not sure yet if his cattle are what I need. Mr. Crawford has a good reputation, but his ranch is relatively small. If you want the best stock, you should visit the Harrison place. Samuel Harrison has the largest operation in the county, and his longhorns are famous throughout Texas. Thank you for the advice. I will seek him out." They had reached the hotel, and Xavier held the door open for her. "Theresa, I was wondering if you might join me for a walk this evening after dinner. I would like to see more of the town, and I would appreciate your company." Her heart leaped. "I would like that very much." The rest of the day seemed to crawl by. Theresa went through her usual Sunday routine, overseeing the preparation and serving of dinner, reviewing the week's accounts, planning the menu for the following days. But her mind was elsewhere, counting down the hours until evening. When she finally met Xavier in the lobby after the dinner service was complete, the sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. They walked west through town, away from the busy Main Street toward the quieter residential area where a few hardy families had built proper houses. "How long have you owned your ranch in Montana?" Theresa asked as they strolled along the dusty road. 6 years. "I worked as a hired hand for nearly a decade before that, saving every penny until I could afford to buy my own land. It is not a huge spread, only about 5,000 acres, but it is mine." "That must have taken incredible discipline." "It did. There were plenty of times I was tempted to spend my wages on temporary pleasures like most of the other cowboys did, but I kept my eye on the goal." He paused to let a wagon pass, then continued, "My father was a sharecropper in Missouri. We were always poor, always struggling, always at the mercy of someone else's generosity or lack thereof. I swore I would never live that way. I would own my own land, answer to no one, build something that could not be taken away." "And you succeeded." "I did, though success brought its own complications. Running a ranch is brutally hard work, especially in Montana where the weather and the distances work against you. Some years I have barely broken even, but I am still independent, still my own man, and that is worth every hardship." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, leaving the houses behind and climbing a small hill that overlooked the town. From this vantage point, Bandera looked almost picturesque, the rough edges softened by distance and the golden light of sunset. "What about you?" Xavier asked. "Have you ever regretted choosing this life? Do you ever wish you had married, had a family instead of a hotel?" It was a bold question, but Theresa found she did not mind. "I have thought about it," she admitted. "Especially when I see happy families, or when guests check in with their children, and I realize what I might be missing. But I have never met anyone who made me want to give up my independence." Marriage for a woman means surrendering control, becoming legally subservient to your husband. I have watched too many intelligent, capable women lose themselves in such arrangements. It does not have to be that way, Xavier said quietly. The right partnership should enhance both people, not diminish either one. That is a lovely sentiment, but rarely the reality. Perhaps you have not seen the right examples. He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. My parents were married for 40 years before my father died. They were true partners in every sense. My mother worked alongside my father in the fields, managed the household, made every major decision jointly with him. He valued her opinion above his own in many matters. When he died, she was lost not because she could not function without him, but because she had lost her other half, her equal. Theresa felt something shift in her chest. That sounds beautiful. It was. It is also what I want for myself, though I have not found it yet. I thought perhaps I did not need it, that the ranch and my work would be enough. But lately, I have started to realize how empty that life feels without someone to share it with. The sun had nearly set now, the sky deepening to purple, and the first stars beginning to appear. They were standing very close together, and Theresa could feel the warmth radiating from Xavier's body in the cooling evening air. "Why are you really here, Xavier?" she asked softly. "Is it truly just about buying cattle?" He was quiet for a long moment before answering. "I am here because I needed a change. Because I woke up one morning 6 weeks ago and realized I had been alone on that ranch for nearly 6 years, speaking to no one but hired hands, living like a hermit. I told myself I was content, but I was lying. I was lonely, Theresa. So lonely it felt like a physical ache. His honesty moved her deeply. "And has this trip helped?" "More than I expected." His hand came up to gently cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin in a feather-light caress. "Especially in the last day and a half." Theresa's breath caught. She should step back, maintain propriety, remember that he was a guest, and she was a businesswoman with a reputation to protect. But she could not make herself move away. Instead, she leaned into his touch, her eyes closing briefly at the simple pleasure of human contact. "Theresa." Her name was a whisper on his lips. "Tell me I am not imagining this connection between us." "You are not imagining it," she whispered back. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She did not want. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet and perfect, a first kiss that felt somehow like a homecoming. Theresa's hands came up to rest on his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her palms. When they finally drew apart, both were breathing heavily. Xavier rested his forehead against hers, his hands still framing her face. "I was not expecting this," he said. "I was not looking for this. Neither was I." Theresa opened her eyes, meeting his golden gaze. "I do not know what to do with it. We could start by being honest with each other. By not running from whatever this is. You are leaving soon. You have a ranch in Montana. I have a hotel here. There is no simple resolution to this." "No, there is not." He stroked her hair back from her face with infinite tenderness. "But that does not make what I feel for you any less real." "I have never experienced anything like this before, Theresa. In one day, you have made me feel more alive than I have in years." "I feel the same way," she admitted. "It terrifies me. Me too." He smiled then, that warm smile that transformed his face. "But I am willing to be terrified if you are." They walked back to the hotel hand in hand, not speaking much but drawing comfort from each other's presence. When they reached the Lone Star, Xavier walked her to the door of her private quarters. "Thank you for this evening," he said. "For your honesty, for your company, for that kiss." "Thank you for the same." Theresa hesitated, then added, "I do not know where this leads, Xavier. I am not sure I am ready for the complications." "Then we will take it slowly. one day at a time. I am not going anywhere for at least a week or two, and perhaps we can use that time to figure out what this is, what it could be. I would like that. He kissed her once more, achingly tender, then bid her good night and climbed the stairs to his room. Theresa entered her quarters in a daze, her lips still tingling from his kisses, her heart racing with equal parts excitement and fear. She had built a life here in Bandera, a good life full of purpose and independence. But she had also been lonely, though she had rarely admitted it even to herself. Now Xavier had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known she was praying, and everything she thought she knew about what she wanted was being called into question. Over the next week, Theresa and Xavier fell into an easy pattern. He spent his days visiting the local ranches, examining cattle and negotiating purchases, while she managed the hotel. But every evening they would find time to be together, sharing meals in the dining room after the other guests had retired, taking walks through town, sitting in the hotel parlor talking until late at night. Theresa learned that Xavier was 30 years old, that he had 2 sisters still living in Missouri, that his favorite book was Homer's Odyssey, and he could recite long passages from memory. She learned that he played the harmonica, that he had a deep fear of deep water because he had nearly drowned as a child, that he dreamed of one day building a house on his Montana ranch grand enough to host parties and fill with family. He learned that she spoke fluent French thanks to her mother's insistence on education, that she had a weakness for lemon cake, that she wrote poetry in a leather journal she kept hidden in her desk drawer. He learned that she had once been engaged at age 20 to a banker's son in San Antonio, but had broken it off when she realized he expected her to become a decorative accessory to his career, rather than a partner. He learned that she sang not just in church, but also to herself when she thought no one was listening. Soft melodies that made the hotel feel even more like a home. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, moving from tentative friendship to something much more profound. Xavier made no secret of his growing feelings for her, and Theresa found herself falling in love despite all her careful defenses. One evening, nearly 2 weeks into his stay, they were sitting together on the front porch of the hotel watching the sunset when Xavier took her hand. "I have been thinking," he said carefully, "about my ranch, about my life in Montana." Theresa's heart sank. She had been dreading this conversation, knowing it had to come eventually. "What about it? It is a good ranch, but it is not home. I built it because I needed to prove I could, because I needed land of my own. But in the process, I created a prison of sorts. I isolated myself so completely that I forgot what it felt like to be part of a community, to have friends, to share my life with someone." "What are you saying?" He turned to face her fully, his expression earnest. "I am saying that I do not want to go back to that life, not the way it was. These past 2 weeks with you have shown me what I was missing, what I still want from life: connection, purpose beyond mere survival, love." Theresa's pulse quickened. "Xavier, I love you, Theresa. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a short time, but I am more certain of this than I have been of anything in my life. You are brilliant and strong and kind. You have built something remarkable here, created a haven in the wilderness. And somehow, impossibly, you make me want to be a better man." Tears pricked at Theresa's eyes. "I love you too," she whispered. "I have been trying not to, trying to protect myself, but I cannot help it. You have awakened something in me I thought was dead." He cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs gently wiping away the tears that had started to fall. "Then marry me. Come back to Montana with me, or let me sell the ranch and stay here. I do not care which. I just know I cannot imagine my future without you in it." "Xavier, I cannot ask you to give up your ranch. You worked so hard for it." and I will work equally hard for whatever we build together. The ranch was never the goal, Theresa. It was just a means to an end. But you, us, this is the actual goal. This is what I have been searching for without knowing it. She wanted to say yes immediately, to throw caution to the wind and leap into this grand adventure with him. But practical concerns intruded. What about the hotel? I have staff who depend on me, guests who count on the Lone Star. I cannot just abandon it. Then do not. Sell it to someone who will maintain your standards, or find a manager you trust to run it, or keep it and we will split our time between here and Montana. I do not have all the answers, Theresa, but I know we can figure this out together if we both want it badly enough. I want it, she said fiercely. I want you, want us, more than I have wanted anything in a very long time. He kissed her then, deep and passionate, a kiss full of promise and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. Is that a yes? Xavier asked. It is a yes to figuring this out together, to taking a chance on us. Theresa laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. I must be mad. I barely know you. You know the important things, and we will have a lifetime to learn the rest. They sat together on the porch until full dark, making plans and dreaming dreams, two independent souls who had found in each other the perfect complement. The next morning, Theresa woke with a sense of purpose. She had decisions to make, and she had never been one to delay difficult choices once her mind was set. After breakfast service, she called Martha into her office. I need your advice on something important, Theresa began. Martha settled into the chair across from the desk, her wise eyes already knowing. This is about that cowboy from Montana, is it not? His name is Xavier, and yes, it is about him. He has asked me to marry him, Martha. And you said yes, I hope. I have seen the way you two look at each other. It is like watching the sun rise and set at the same time, all that light and warmth. Theresa could not help but smile at the poetic description. I did say yes, or at least yes to trying to make it work, but that leaves me with a significant problem. I cannot run the Lone Star from Montana, and I cannot ask Xavier to give up his ranch entirely. I have been thinking that perhaps you might be interested in taking over the hotel. Martha's eyes widened. You want to sell me the Lone Star? Not sell exactly. I want to make you a partner, with the option to buy me out entirely over time. You know this business as well as I do, Martha. You have been instrumental in making the Lone Star successful. The hotel should stay in the hands of someone who loves it as much as I do. Theresa, I do not have the capital for such an investment. We will work out terms that are manageable, low monthly payments or a percentage of the profits, whatever makes sense. I am not looking to make a fortune from this, Martha. I am looking to ensure the Lone Star continues to be what we built it to be, and I cannot think of anyone better suited to that task than you. Martha's eyes filled with tears. You are serious about this? Completely serious. Think about it, talk to your family if you need to, but know that the offer is genuine. I trust you, Martha, with my business and my legacy. The older woman stood and embraced Theresa tightly. I do not need to think about it. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. I will take care of the Lone Star like it was my own child. You have my word on that. With that decided, Theresa felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She sought out Xavier and found him in the livery stable, checking on his horse. I have made some decisions, she announced without preamble. He turned, a smile spreading across his face. Have you now? I am going to make Martha a partner in the hotel, with the option for her to eventually buy me out completely. That way the Lone Star will be in good hands, and I will be free to come to Montana with you. The words felt momentous, terrifying, and absolutely right all at once. Xavier crossed the distance between them in 3 long strides and swept her into his arms, spinning her around until she laughed with dizzy delight. "You are sure about this?" "I am sure about you, about us. The rest we will figure out as we go." He set her down gently, his hands lingering on her waist. "I promise you will not regret this. I will spend every day of the rest of my life making sure you are happy. I believe you." And she did. Against all logic and caution, she trusted this man completely. They decided to marry in Bandera before traveling to Montana. Theresa wanted her friends and the community that had supported her to witness her marriage, and Xavier agreed readily. They set the date for 3 weeks hence, giving them time to arrange the details and for Theresa to transition her hotel responsibilities to Martha. News of their engagement spread through Bandera like wildfire. Some were scandalized that Theresa would marry a man she had known for such a short time. Others were romantic enough to be charmed by the whirlwind courtship. But most were simply happy for her, recognizing that Theresa had worked hard and sacrificed much for the Lone Star, and she deserved a chance at personal happiness. Mrs. Patterson took charge of organizing the wedding with the enthusiasm of a general marshalling troops. "You saved my husband's life when he took sick here last year," she told Theresa firmly. "The least I can do is ensure you have a proper wedding. Now, about your dress, I have some lovely silk that would be perfect." The weeks passed in a blur of activity. Theresa managed the hotel, trained Martha on the administrative aspects of the business she had previously handled alone, and somehow found time for dress fittings and wedding plans. Xavier completed his cattle purchases and made arrangements for the herd to be driven to Montana in the summer, under the supervision of a trail boss he trusted. Through it all, Theresa and Xavier stole moments together whenever they could. Early morning rides through the hill country before the day's heat set in. Late-night conversations in the hotel parlor. Stolen kisses in the pantry when no one was looking. Each interaction deepened their bond, confirming that their decision to marry was right despite its speed. One evening, about a week before the wedding, they sat together in Theresa's private sitting room reviewing the documents that would make Martha an official partner in the hotel. Xavier watched as Theresa carefully explained each clause to Martha, ensuring the older woman understood exactly what she was agreeing to. "You are remarkably generous," Xavier said after Martha had left. "You could have sold the hotel for far more money than what you are charging Martha." "Money is not the point. The Lone Star was never just a business to me. It was my home, my purpose. I could not bear to see it fall into the hands of someone who would turn it into just another rough boarding house. Martha will preserve what we built here." Most people would not be so willing to walk away from something they worked so hard to create. Theresa considered that. "I am not walking away so much as I am walking toward something new. You helped me see that I was hiding here, Xavier. I told myself I was building a business and maintaining my independence, but really I was just avoiding risk, avoiding the possibility of being hurt or disappointed. And now I am ready to take the risk. You made me brave enough to want more than just safety and routine. You made me want partnership and adventure and all the messy, complicated beauty of sharing a life with someone." She moved to sit beside him on the small sofa. "You made this place feel like home in a way it never quite did before, because home is not just a building or a business. It is wherever the people you love are." Xavier pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That is the most romantic thing anyone has ever said to me. It is the truth. I spent 3 years building the Lone Star into something I could be proud of, but I was always slightly lonely even in the midst of all the activity. Then you walked through the door and suddenly everything shifted. The hotel felt warmer, brighter. I felt more alive. I felt the same way." That first night when you showed me to my room and I looked around at all the care you had put into every detail, I thought this was the kind of place I would like to come home to. And then I got to know you, and I realized it was not the place at all. It was you. You made the Lone Star feel like home because you poured your heart into it. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, wrapped in each other's arms, both contemplating the major life changes that lay ahead. "Are you frightened?" Theresa asked quietly. "About getting married, about taking on a wife who has never lived on a ranch before." "Terrified," Xavier admitted with a soft laugh. "But also more excited than I have been in years. Yes, there will be challenges. The ranch is isolated and the work is hard. You will have to adapt to a very different kind of life than what you have known here. But I truly believe we can build something wonderful together, Theresa. A real home, a real partnership. I believe that too." She tilted her face up to kiss him. "I love you, Xavier Garrett. Thank you for walking into my hotel that day." "Best decision I ever made," he murmured against her lips. The wedding took place on a perfect May morning, with the entire town of Bandera seemingly in attendance. The Methodist church was packed to capacity, flowers adorning every surface thanks to Mrs. Patterson's efforts. Theresa wore a dress of cream silk with delicate lace trim, her hair arranged in an elaborate style threaded with tiny white roses. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Xavier had picked himself that morning from the hills surrounding town. Martha stood as her attendant, beaming with pride and happiness. Xavier's groomsman was John Crawford, the rancher he had bought cattle from, who had become a friend over the past weeks. Reverend Matthews performed the ceremony with warmth and humor, clearly pleased to be marrying two people so obviously in love. When Xavier slipped the simple gold band onto Theresa's finger and promised to love and cherish her for all their days, her eyes filled with happy tears. When she made the same promises to him, his voice was rough with emotion. And when Reverend Matthews finally pronounced them husband and wife and Xavier kissed her in front of the whole congregation, Theresa felt a joy so complete it seemed to fill every corner of her being. The reception was held at the Lone Star, a fitting tribute to the place where their love story had begun. Martha had outdone herself with the food, and the dining room and parlor were filled with well-wishers offering congratulations and toasts. Theresa moved through the celebration in a happy daze, her hand clasped firmly in Xavier's, barely able to believe this was real. "Happy, Mrs. Garrett," Xavier whispered in her ear during a quiet moment. "Happier than I have ever been in my life, Mr. Garrett." They spent their wedding night at the hotel, in the very room where Xavier had first stayed. The next morning, they would begin the long journey to Montana. But for now, they had only each other and the sweet intimacy of new marriage. As Theresa lay in Xavier's arms that night, listening to the familiar sounds of the hotel settling around them, she felt profoundly grateful. She had built a good life here in Bandera, but this partnership with Xavier was something even better. Together, they would build a new life in Montana, and whatever challenges they faced, she knew they would face them as a team. The journey to Montana took nearly 2 months, traveling by train where they could and by wagon where they could not. Theresa saw parts of the country she had only read about in books. The vast plains of Kansas, the dramatic peaks of the Rocky Mountains, the wild beauty of Wyoming Territory. Xavier proved to be an excellent traveling companion, patient with delays and always ready with a story or observation to pass the time. When they finally arrived at the ranch in late July, Theresa's first impression was of overwhelming space. The ranch house sat in a valley surrounded by rolling grassland that seemed to stretch to the horizon in every direction. Mountains loomed in the distance, their peaks still snow-capped despite the summer heat. "Welcome home," Xavier said, helping her down from the wagon. Home. The word felt strange in this context. The ranch house was not the grand structure Xavier had described wanting to build someday. It was a simple log cabin, sturdy and functional, but nothing like the Lone Star with its elegant furnishings and carefully chosen decor. But as they walked inside and Theresa looked around at the rough-hewn beams and simple furniture, she felt a spark of excitement. This was a blank canvas, a place she could help transform into something special. Xavier had built the bones of a life here, but together they could create a home. "It is not much," Xavier said, suddenly sounding uncertain. "I know it is nothing compared to what you are used to." Theresa turned to him and cupped his face in her hands. "It is perfect. It is ours, and we will make it beautiful together." The first months in Montana were harder than Theresa had anticipated. The work was relentless, and the isolation was real. Xavier's nearest neighbors were a full day's ride away, and the closest town was 2 days distant. She learned to cook over a wood stove, to preserve food for the long winter, to help with ranch work when the hired hands needed extra help. Her hands, once soft and accustomed to holding pens and ledgers, became calloused from manual labor, but there were compensations. The stunning beauty of the landscape never ceased to amaze her. The quiet evenings sitting on the porch with Xavier, watching the sun set over the mountains. The profound satisfaction of building something together, whether it was a new corral or a vegetable garden, or simply a conversation about their dreams for the future. Xavier was unfailingly patient with her as she adjusted to ranch life, never criticizing when she made mistakes, but always ready to teach her what she needed to know. In turn, Theresa brought her organizational skills and business acumen to bear on the ranch's operations, helping Xavier keep better records and plan more strategically for the future. They fell into partnership as naturally as they had fallen in love, each complementing the other's strengths and compensating for weaknesses. Xavier taught Theresa to ride like a true ranch woman, to shoot a rifle accurately, to read the weather signs in the sky. Theresa taught Xavier to appreciate literature and music, to see the beauty in a well-set table and thoughtfully chosen decor, to communicate more openly about his feelings. Letters from Bandera arrived regularly, brought by the mail carrier who made the trip once a month. Martha reported that the Lone Star was thriving under her management and sent along profits according to their partnership agreement. Mrs. Patterson wrote with all the town gossip. Even Reverend Matthews sent a note expressing his pleasure at having performed their wedding ceremony. Theresa always saved Xavier's sister's letters for last. She had never met Iris and Margaret Garrett in person, but they had welcomed her warmly through correspondence. Their letters were full of family stories and questions about ranch life and warm expressions of affection for their new sister-in-law. Winter came early and harsh to Montana that year. By October, snow was already falling regularly, and by November they were largely snowbound. Theresa learned what Xavier had meant about the brutal cold. There were days when the temperature did not rise above zero, when stepping outside for even a few minutes risked frostbite. But the winter was not all hardship. Confined to the house for weeks at a time, Theresa and Xavier grew even closer. They read books aloud to each other by firelight. Xavier taught her to play the harmonica. They made love with passionate intensity, finding in each other warmth and comfort against the frozen world outside. And in the spring, when the snows finally melted and the grasslands turned green again, Theresa discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with a complex mixture of emotions. Joy, certainly, that she and Xavier would have a child. But also fear, because she was far from medical help, far from the midwives and doctors who had attended births in Bandera. Xavier was overjoyed but equally concerned, and they discussed seriously whether Theresa should travel to San Antonio or even back to Bandera for the birth. In the end, they decided she would stay at the ranch. The journey would be too difficult in the later stages of pregnancy, and Xavier found a reliable midwife in the nearest town who agreed to come stay at the ranch a month before the baby was due. The pregnancy was not easy. Theresa suffered from terrible nausea in the early months, and the later months brought fatigue and discomfort. But Xavier was endlessly supportive, taking over more of the household duties and insisting she rest as much as possible. Their son was born in late February of 1879, during a brief warm spell between winter storms. The birth was difficult, nearly 20 hours of labor that left Theresa exhausted and frightened. But when the midwife finally placed the squalling infant in her arms, all the pain and fear evaporated in a rush of overwhelming love. "He is perfect," Xavier said, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed down at his son. "Theresa, you are incredible. I love you so much." They named the baby Samuel, after Theresa's father. He was a robust infant with a powerful set of lungs and an appetite to match. Those first months of parenthood were exhausting, filled with sleepless nights and constant demands, but also shot through with moments of piercing joy. Watching Xavier with their son, seeing the gentleness in his strong hands as he held the tiny baby, Theresa fell in love with her husband all over again. He was an attentive father, never complaining about being woken in the night, always ready to help with feeding and changing and soothing. "You are a natural at this," Theresa told him one evening as she watched him rock Samuel to sleep. "I never thought I would be a father," Xavier said softly. "I had resigned myself to a solitary life, but now I cannot imagine anything better than this." As Samuel grew from infant to toddler, the ranch prospered. The cattle Xavier had purchased in Texas proved to be exactly what he had hoped for: hardy animals that adapted well to the Montana climate. The herd grew steadily, and with it, their income and security. With the additional money, they were able to expand the ranch house, adding on a proper parlor and 2 more bedrooms. Theresa filled the new spaces with careful touches that made the house feel like a home. Curtains sewn from fabric ordered from the Sears catalog, a table she refinished herself, wildflowers in jars on the windowsills. When Samuel was 2, Theresa gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace. The birth was easier than Samuel's had been, and Grace proved to be a calmer baby than her energetic brother. Xavier was besotted with his daughter, declaring her the most beautiful thing he had ever seen next to her mother. Life settled into a pattern that felt both comfortable and deeply satisfying. The work was still hard, the isolation still real, but Theresa had never been happier. She had created a home here in this wild country, a place filled with love and purpose and the laughter of children. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Xavier surprised her with a gift, a beautiful piano he had ordered from Chicago and had shipped west at considerable expense. It took 6 men to get it into the house, and Theresa cried when she saw it. "I know you gave up a great deal when you married me," Xavier said. "You left behind your business, your friends, everything you had built. I wanted to give you something that would bring you joy, that would remind you of the cultured life you had before." "Xavier, I did not give up anything," Theresa said through her tears. "I traded one good thing for something even better. But this piano, it is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." That evening, after the children were asleep, she played for him. Her fingers were stiff at first, out of practice from years without an instrument, but muscle memory returned. She played Chopin and Mozart, ballads and hymns, filling the house with music it had never heard before. Xavier listened with his eyes closed, a smile on his face, and when she finished he pulled her into his arms and held her close. "You made this place feel like home," Theresa whispered against his chest. "When I first came here, I was terrified. It was so different from everything I had known. But you were patient with me, and you helped me see that home is not about a location or a building. It is about the people you love and the life you build together." "You gave me the same gift," Xavier replied. "Before you, this ranch was just a job, a proving ground. You made it a home, filled it with love and warmth and meaning. You and the children are my whole world, Theresa." The years continued to pass, bringing both joys and sorrows. When Samuel was 5 and Grace was 3, Theresa gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named Thomas and Elizabeth. The ranch house, expanded again to accommodate the growing family, rang with the sounds of children playing. Xavier's herd grew to nearly 2,000 head, making them one of the more prosperous ranches in the region. They were able to hire additional permanent hands, which eased the workload considerably. Theresa started a small lending library in their home, opening it once a month to neighboring families starved for books and culture in the isolated ranch country. When Samuel turned 10, Xavier began teaching him the business of ranching in earnest. The boy showed natural aptitude for working with cattle and horses, and Xavier glowed with pride watching his son develop skills that would one day allow him to run the ranch himself. Grace, meanwhile, showed her mother's head for numbers and organization. By age 8, she was helping Theresa keep the household accounts and plan meals for the family and hired hands. She was also musical like her mother, and the sound of her practicing piano became a familiar and beloved part of their daily routine. The twins were still young enough to simply be wild, spending their days exploring the ranch lands and getting into mischief. But they too would find their places in the family enterprise in time. Theresa maintained correspondence with her friends in Bandera throughout the years. Martha wrote regularly with news of the Lone Star, which continued to thrive. The hotel had become something of an institution in the town, known throughout Texas for its quality and hospitality. Theresa felt a glow of pride knowing that the legacy she had begun lived on in such capable hands. Mrs. Patterson's letters grew less frequent as she aged, but each one was treasured. And when word came in the spring of 1889 that the older woman had passed peacefully in her sleep, Theresa grieved the loss of a true friend. "I wish I could have seen her one more time," Theresa said to Xavier as she folded the letter bearing the sad news. "We could visit Bandera," Xavier suggested. "The children are old enough now to travel, and I know you miss your friends there. We could make a trip of it, show the children where you used to live." The idea took root immediately. They began planning a journey back to Texas for the summer of 1890, when Samuel would be 11 and the twins would be 5. It would be expensive and complicated, but both Theresa and Xavier felt it was important to maintain those connections to her past. The trip, when they finally made it, was everything Theresa had hoped for. Bandera had grown in the 12 years since she had left, now boasting a proper bank, a telegraph office, and 3 churches. But the Lone Star Hotel remained the jewel of the town, beautifully maintained and as welcoming as ever. Martha, now in her late 60s but still vital and energetic, greeted them with tears of joy. "Theresa, look at you, and these beautiful children. Oh, I am so happy you came." They stayed at the hotel, of course, and it was strange and wonderful for Theresa to be a guest in the place she had once owned. Martha had maintained all of her standards and even improved on some, adding electric lights in the lobby and dining room. "You have done magnificently with the hotel," Theresa told her friend. "I am so proud of what you have accomplished." "I learned from the best," Martha replied. "But enough about the hotel. Tell me everything about your life in Montana." "Your letters have been wonderful, but I want to hear it all in person." They spent 2 weeks in Bandera, reconnecting with old friends and introducing the children to the place where their mother had lived before she met their father. Samuel and Grace were fascinated by the hotel, asking endless questions about what it had been like to run such an establishment. "Did you like it better than the ranch?" Samuel asked his mother one evening. Theresa considered the question carefully. "I loved the hotel and I am proud of what I built here. But I love our ranch more, because that is where you and your siblings were born, where your father and I have built our life together. The hotel was my first home as an independent woman, but the ranch is my true home." On their last night in Bandera, Xavier and Theresa took a walk alone through the town, leaving the children in Martha's care at the hotel. They walked to the church where they had married, to the hill where Xavier had first kissed her, revisiting the places where their love story had begun. "Do you have any regrets?" Xavier asked as they stood looking down at the town in the gathering twilight. "About leaving here, about choosing the life we have?" "Not a single one," Theresa said firmly. "This place will always be special to me, but it is part of my past. You and the children, the ranch, that is my present and my future. I would make the same choice again in a heartbeat." They returned to Montana at summer's end, the children chattering excitedly about all they had seen and done in Texas. The ranch felt welcoming after the long journey, the mountains rising protectively around their valley, the house they had built together waiting to embrace them. That night, after the children were asleep and the house was quiet, Theresa and Xavier sat together on the porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were brilliant in the clear Montana sky, and a cool breeze brought the scent of pine from the mountains. "When I first came here," Theresa said softly, "I was so frightened. Everything was foreign and difficult, but you made it feel safe. You made it feel like home." "You did the same for me," Xavier replied, taking her hand. "I had built this ranch, but it was empty until you filled it with love and life. You and the children are the best things that ever happened to me, Theresa. Every single day I thank God that you walked into my life." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly content. They had built something remarkable together, not just a successful ranch but a true partnership, a family, a home in every sense of the word. The years continued to unfold, bringing their share of both triumphs and trials. There was the winter of 1893, when a massive blizzard killed nearly a quarter of their herd, a devastating loss that took years to recover from financially. There was the summer when 7-year-old Thomas broke his arm falling from a horse, and Theresa's terror that the break would not heal properly in the absence of a proper doctor. There was the joy of watching Grace win a music competition in Helena when she was 14, playing piano with a skill that rivaled professional musicians. Through it all, Theresa and Xavier remained each other's foundation. They had disagreements, certainly, sometimes heated ones about how to handle the children or manage the ranch finances. But they never went to bed angry, always talked through their differences, always remembered that they were partners in this life. When Samuel turned 18 in 1887, Xavier formally made him a full partner in the ranch operation. The young man had grown tall and strong, with his father's work ethic and his mother's keen intelligence. He proved himself more than capable of handling the responsibility, and Xavier began to step back slightly from the day-to-day operations, spending more time with the younger children and on improvements to their home and land. Grace, at 16, was being courted by the son of their nearest neighbors, a respectful young man named Daniel, who Xavier approved of after careful scrutiny. Watching his daughter navigate young love brought back memories of his own whirlwind courtship of Theresa, and he found himself appreciating even more what a leap of faith she had taken in marrying him after knowing him for such a short time. "Were you ever frightened?" he asked Theresa one evening as they watched Grace and Daniel taking a chaperoned walk around the property. "In those early days, did you ever think you had made a terrible mistake marrying a stranger?" "Sometimes," Theresa admitted. "There were moments that first winter when I wondered if I had been completely mad. But then you would do something kind, or say something that made me laugh, or simply hold me when I was homesick, and I would remember why I had chosen you. The fear never lasted long." "I was terrified too," Xavier confessed. "Terrified I would disappoint you, that you would come to resent giving up your comfortable life for this harsh existence. But you never complained, never made me feel like I had asked too much of you. You never asked anything I was not willing to give freely. That was the beauty of our relationship from the start. We chose each other, built this life together as equals. I have never once felt like I sacrificed anything, Xavier. I traded one good life for an even better one." In 1898, Grace married Daniel in a beautiful ceremony on the ranch, with friends and neighbors traveling from all over the region to celebrate. Theresa cried happy tears watching her daughter pledge her life to a good man who clearly adored her, remembering her own wedding day 20 years earlier. Samuel married 2 years later, bringing home a spirited young woman named Catherine who fit into the family as if she had always been there. The ranch house, expanded yet again, now housed 3 generations, with Samuel and Catherine taking over the day-to-day running of the cattle operation while Xavier focused on breeding programs and long-term planning. The twins, now 19, were making their own paths. Thomas had announced his intention to study veterinary medicine in Denver, while Elizabeth wanted to be a teacher. Xavier and Theresa supported both pursuits, proud that their children had the opportunity to choose their own futures rather than being bound by necessity or tradition. By 1900, Theresa and Xavier were grandparents twice over. Grace had given them a grandson, and Samuel and Catherine had a baby daughter. The ranch was prosperous, the family healthy and happy, and Theresa often found herself marveling at how different her life had turned out from what she might have expected back in her Bandera days. One evening in late autumn of that year, Theresa and Xavier took a rare, quiet moment alone, riding out to a favorite spot on the edge of their property, where a small creek ran through a grove of aspens. The trees were golden with fall color, and the late afternoon sun painted everything in warm honey tones. 22 years, Xavier said, dismounting and helping Theresa down from her horse. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I walked into the Lone Star Hotel and saw you for the first time. Other times it feels like we have been together forever. Both are true, Theresa said, taking his hand as they walked to the creek bank. I remember that day so clearly, how you looked when you took off your hat, how your eyes met mine. I knew even then that something important was happening, though I tried to tell myself I was being foolish. Thank God you did not listen to yourself. Xavier put his arm around her shoulders, drawing her close against his side. I came to Bandera looking for cattle and found so much more. I found you, found love, found the home I did not even know I was searching for. Theresa tilted her face up to look at him. His hair was silver now at the temples, his face lined with the years and the hard work of ranching, but his eyes were the same as they had been that first day, warm and full of love. You gave me the courage to want more than just safety and independence, she said. You showed me that partnership does not mean losing yourself, It means becoming more fully who you were meant to be. I am a better person because of you, Xavier. A happier person. The feeling is entirely mutual. He kissed her softly, a kiss that still had the power to make her heart race even after more than 2 decades together. I love you, Theresa Garrett. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, my darling husband. Thank you for walking into my hotel all those years ago. Thank you for staying. They stood there as the sun set, two people who had taken a chance on love and built something extraordinary from it. The ranch spread around them, a testament to their hard work and shared vision. The house they had built together waited in the distance, filled with children and grandchildren and the echoes of countless happy memories. Theresa thought back to that day, 22 years ago, when a dusty cowboy had appeared at her door asking for a room. She had been so focused on her business, so determined to prove she could succeed on her own. She had built herself a comfortable life, but she had been lonely without fully realizing it. And then, Xavier Garrett had walked into the Lone Star Hotel and everything had changed. He had seen past her business-like exterior to the woman underneath, had valued her strength while also cherishing her softness. He had offered her partnership and adventure, and a love that had only deepened with time. She had told him, that day on the hill in Bandera before they married, that he had made the hotel feel like home. But the truth was so much bigger than that. Xavier had shown her what home really meant, had taught her that it was not about a place or a building or even a business. Home was the person who knew you completely and loved you anyway. Home was the family you built together and the life you created side by side. Home was finding someone who made you want to be brave, who gave you the courage to risk everything for the possibility of something wonderful. Xavier had been all of that for her and more. And in return, she had given him her whole heart, had built a life with him that exceeded anything either of them could have imagined that day when they first met. Now, standing in the golden autumn light with her husband's arms around her and their life spread out before them in all its imperfect beauty, Theresa felt profoundly grateful. Not just for what they had built, but for the courage they had both shown in taking a chance on each other, in believing that love could be enough to bridge the gap between two very different lives. "What are you thinking?" Xavier asked, reading her contemplative expression. "I am thinking that I am exactly where I am supposed to be," Theresa said simply. "With exactly who I am supposed to be with. I am thinking that every choice I made, every risk I took, led me to this moment, and I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard parts. The blizzards and the isolation and the times when money was tight and the future uncertain. Not even those. They made the good times sweeter, and they showed me what we were capable of when we worked together." She turned in his embrace to face him fully. "We built something real, Xavier. Not just a ranch or a family, but a partnership that has weathered every storm. That is worth more than all the comfort or security or independence I left behind." As twilight fell and the first stars began to appear, they rode back to the ranch house together, their horses moving in easy tandem like their riders' lives had been joined. Lamplight glowed in the windows of the house, and they could hear the faint sound of Grace playing piano, teaching the tune to her young son. This was home. Not the beautiful hotel in Texas where they had met, not the log cabin Xavier had built alone before Theresa arrived, but this place they had created together through love and work and sheer determination. Every board and nail, every child and grandchild, every memory held within these walls was a testament to what two people could build when they chose to walk through life side by side. Xavier helped Theresa dismount, and they stood for a moment longer outside, looking at their home. No regrets. He asked one more time, Only that I did not meet you sooner, Theresa replied with a smile. But perhaps we needed to become who we were before we could appreciate what we found in each other. Wise as always, my love. They walked into the house hand in hand, into the warmth and light and love that filled every corner. Their children and grandchildren greeted them with smiles and questions about their ride. And soon Theresa was swept up in the pleasant chaos of family life, helping to prepare dinner and listening to the twins debate some point of politics, while Samuel showed Xavier sketches of improvements he wanted to make to the cattle pens. Later, after the evening meal was finished and the dishes cleaned, after the grandchildren were tucked into bed and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Theresa and Xavier sat together in their bedroom. It was not a fancy room, nothing like the elegant quarters Theresa had occupied at the Lone Star, but it was theirs, filled with the accumulation of 22 years of shared life. You remember what I said to you that first night, after you walked me to my door? Theresa asked, sitting at her dressing table and unpinning her hair. You said you did not know where our relationship would lead, that you were not ready for the complications, Xavier replied from where he sat on the edge of their bed. And I said we would take it one day at a time. And we did. Every single day we chose each other again. We chose to build this life together. Best choice I ever made. Xavier rose and came to stand behind her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. In the mirror, they looked at their reflections, two people who had aged together, whose faces showed the marks of hard work and laughter and years of love. You made this place feel like home, Theresa said softly, echoing the words she had spoken so long ago but with even deeper meaning now. Not just the ranch, but my whole life. Wherever you are, that is where I belong. Xavier bent to kiss the top of her head, his eyes meeting hers in the mirror. And you, my darling wife, turned my house into a home, my work into a purpose, my life into something worth living. You are my home, Theresa. You always will be. They prepared for bed in comfortable silence, moving around each other with the ease of long familiarity. When they finally settled under the quilts Theresa had made over the years, Xavier pulled her close against his side, her head resting on his shoulder as it had countless nights before. I love you, Theresa whispered into the darkness. I love you too, always and forever. And as she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, surrounded by the home they had built and the family they had created, Theresa knew with absolute certainty that this was what she had been meant for all along. Not just running a successful business or proving she could be independent, but this, a life shared with someone who loved her completely, a partnership that had weathered every test and emerged stronger. The Lone Star Hotel would always be part of her story, the place where she had proven herself and built her confidence. But this ranch in Montana, this life with Xavier and their children and grandchildren, this was her true legacy. This was home in every sense of the word. And she had found it all because a dusty cowboy from Montana had walked into her hotel one spring evening in 1878 and seen something in her worth staying for, worth risking everything for, worth building a lifetime around. She had been his haven, and he had been hers. Together, they had created something neither could have built alone. A love that endured, a family that thrived, and a home that would echo with their story for generations to come. As the years continued to pass, the ranch they had built together continued to flourish under Samuel's capable management. Xavier stepped back further from the day-to-day operations, spending more time with his grandchildren and pursuing projects that brought him joy rather than simply necessity. He built a larger barn, improved the breeding program for their horses, and finally constructed the grand house he had dreamed of so many years ago, a beautiful structure with a wide porch and multiple fireplaces that became the center of family gatherings. Theresa divided her time between helping Catherine manage the growing household, teaching her granddaughters to play piano, and working on a project she had begun in secret, writing down the story of her life, from her early days in San Antonio through her time running the Lone Star Hotel to her life in Montana with Xavier. She wanted her grandchildren and great-grandchildren to know where they came from, to understand the courage it had taken to build this family legacy. When she finally showed the completed manuscript to Xavier on their 30th wedding anniversary in 1908, he read it with tears streaming down his weathered face. "This is beautiful," he said when he finished. "This is our story, Theresa. The true story of how two people found each other against all odds and built something lasting. I wanted to make sure it was remembered," Theresa said. "Not just that we existed, but how we loved each other, how we chose each other every day. I want our great-grandchildren to know that real love is possible, that true partnership exists. They will know, because they can see it in us. We are living proof." That anniversary celebration was one of the happiest days of Theresa's life. All 4 of their children were there with their families, the house overflowing with grandchildren ranging from infants to young adults. They held a grand party with music and dancing and enough food to feed a small army. Grace played piano while Daniel sang, their voices blending harmoniously after years of marriage. Samuel told stories of the ranch's history that had the children howling with laughter. The twins, both successful in their chosen careers, spoke movingly about what their parents' example had meant to them. And Theresa and Xavier danced together in the center of the parlor, moving to music only they could hear, lost in each other's eyes as they had been 3 decades earlier. 30 years, Theresa marveled. Sometimes it feels impossible that we have been together so long. 30 years, and I love you more now than I did the day we married, Xavier replied. You age like fine wine, Mrs. Garrett, more precious with every passing year. Flatterer. But she smiled, because she felt the same way about him. They lived to see the 20th century well underway, witnessed automobiles and airplanes and all manner of modern marvels. The ranch adapted with the times, using new techniques and technology while maintaining the core values Xavier and Theresa had established: quality over quantity, sustainability over short-term profit, family over wealth. When Xavier died peacefully in his sleep in 1922 at the age of 74, Theresa grieved deeply, but without regret. They had been married for 44 years, had built a family and a legacy that would endure long after they were both gone. He had lived a full life and died surrounded by love, which was all anyone could hope for. At his funeral, attended by what seemed like half of Montana, Theresa spoke briefly about her husband. She talked about how he had walked into her hotel in Texas all those years ago and changed her life forever. She talked about his kindness, his strength, his unwavering support of her dreams and ambitions. She talked about the home they had built together, not just the physical structures but the family, the love, the partnership that had sustained them both. He made everywhere we were together feel like home, Theresa said, her voice strong despite her tears. And even though he is gone from this world, he remains home for my heart. I will carry him with me until we meet again. Theresa lived another 6 years after Xavier's death, time she spent surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, passing on stories and wisdom, and the legacy of love she and Xavier had created. She never remarried, never even considered it. She had found her great love, her true partner, and nothing could replace what they had shared. When Theresa Kane Garrett died in her sleep in 1928 at the age of 73, She was buried next to Xavier on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The tombstone bore both their names and a simple inscription. Together they built a home. Together they built a life. Together forever. The ranch remained in the family for generations, each one building on the foundation Xavier and Theresa had laid. Her memoir was published and became required reading for all family members, a reminder of where they came from and what real love looked like. The Lone Star Hotel in Bandera, Texas, operated until 1952, when it was finally converted to apartments, but a plaque on the building commemorated Theresa Kane's ownership and her role in establishing Bandera as a civilized town. But perhaps the greatest legacy was not the ranch or the hotel or even the memoir. It was the example they set of what marriage could be. Two independent, strong-willed people who chose to join their lives while maintaining their individual strengths. They had shown that love did not require sacrifice of self, but rather celebration of partnership. They had proven that home was not a place but a person, and that the courage to take a chance on love could yield rewards beyond measure. Their story became legend in the family, told and retold until it took on mythic proportions. But at its heart, it was simple. A hotel owner and a cowboy who met by chance and built by choice a life filled with love, purpose, and meaning. And it had all begun with Xavier Garrett walking into the Lone Star Hotel one spring evening in 1878, looking for a place to stay and finding instead the home he had been searching for his entire life.